Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future. I'm Zach Gardner, the chief architect at Keyhole Software, and like pretty much everyone else that I know in my field, my career did not move in a linear progression. There were a lot of false starts, a lot of twists and turns, and a few U-turns, but eventually I landed. I got the chief in front of the name for what it's worth, and I felt that I really needed to give back. I had a ton of great mentors that gave me an enormous amount of advice. And I felt that I'd be shortchanging the world if I didn't at least try to go out and find other people that have maybe gone through similar or maybe even different experiences, figure out where they landed, why they landed, and then what recommendations they have for people that are the up and coming, the sort of the next generation, the next level of technical leaders. Today with me, all the way in beautiful Colorado. I got that right. You're in Colorado, right? Are you farther
I'm
west?
actually in Seattle. Yeah. The company I work for is in Colorado. I'm in Seattle. So
Dang it. All right, you're farther west than I remembered from my, very detailed notes. I have Jody Claggett, the director of data operations at Vail Health. Jody, how's it hanging?
it's great, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. And of course, all the views and opinions expressed in this program are the views and opinions of the participants who do not reflect their employers, any trade organizations they're affiliated with, any yacht clubs, or minor league baseball teams. This is two people. We're just having a good time. That's all. So, for those that haven't met you, could you give the audience a little bit of information on your background? Where did you get into technology? What are some of the interesting things that you worked on in your career? Just kind of, just get a feel for it. Get a feel where you've been.
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. Well, I had the privilege of growing up with some data geeks or some tech geeks when I was really young. When I was a teenager in high school, my best friends were all geeks and we're all tech nerds. So every weekend we were playing Doom and StarCraft and all the good stuff back in the day. And I really had the privilege of learning from those guys. They were really into networking and coding, and so we just threw. It was weird because in this small area of where I grew up, there was five, six of us that were just this that had the same mindset, and maybe it was just the time period, but we were all sort of in that space and together. We all kind of went to the same school, we rode the same bus, so we just kind of gleaned off of each other and grew from there. I really got my career started in tech support. So back then, 20 years ago, I like to say that was sort of the MO. That was sort of kind of the standard process for us growing up. That's how I understood you would sort of progress your career, right? You'd get into a entry level help desk role and then progress from there, get to tier one, tier two support, and kind of grow from there. And that's really what I did. So that's sort of a traditional approach. I think the thing that makes me unique is I never went to school. Never went to college after high school. So I learned on my own. I taught myself how to code SQL. I learned on the job. I learned how to support customers, all within the first maybe 5 years of my career. So when I was in high school, I did an IT internship with my high school. I did that for 2 summers in a row, and that's where I sort of learned, basic tech support, troubleshooting, break fix scenarios across a variety of different hardware, from Mac systems to Windows systems. And this was sort of school based systems, so they were sort of some of them were archaic and old, so you had to learn really old technology to go through and fix that stuff. So from there, I progressed into I got a couple positions that were support roles, doing help desk, basically break fix scenarios. And what I really gleaned from that was customer service. More than anything, I enjoyed helping our customers. I enjoyed taking a problem and knowing that they were frustrated and sometimes frustrated and needed extra support and needed to talk through. And I really loved being on the phone and just meeting with people where they were at and helping them fix the problem that they were having. And they enjoyed it so much because at the end, they got what they needed. They had a good conversation with me, and I absolutely love that. So that was like the first 4 or 5 years of my career. And then I got into one role that I took. The questions started to go from these are technical sort of break fix scenarios to we were supporting a website for one of our vendors, and the questions got more into data questions. They weren't necessarily break fix. They were like, hey, can you tell me how many sales leads were passed to this partner? Or, how many leads does this person have? And so there were data questions that we couldn't necessarily answer as a tech support team, but we were being asked to answer those. And so I got access to the database behind it because the tool that we were supporting really didn't have an interface to do this. And so that's how I got into sort of SQL. I had to learn SQL to answer their questions. And all of a sudden, something opened up, and I had this sort of epiphany because not only could I answer questions, but our customers were responding to me in a way that was just blowing my mind. I had, my vendor was saying, hey, these are great. Can you help me with this and do this and this? And that led to more and more. That actually led to a promotion from there. So in this group that I was working with, I was a support tech, and then I got promoted because I was all of a sudden able to answer these questions. So then I became a lead support tech for that. And I found that in that time that I was sort of learning SQL and answering these business questions, it gave me the opportunity to expand my role and grow my career. And it was like something was just blowing up. And all of a sudden I had this epiphany like, oh, this is actually something that I like doing. I know I can do it, and it's helping me in my career, and it's answering these business questions. I'm going to do this. And that's where I really got into data, and started working on reporting and analytics and learning SQL Server, getting more in depth in SQL code. From there, eventually, I went over to Microsoft. I got a full-time position at Microsoft where I was working in sales operations, doing sales analytics and reporting for our sales operations teams, and spent 5.5 years there. From there, I took some time off. I went off on a real different tangent. I went over and I went into culinary school, and I actually bought a restaurant and spent a year doing that. So, and by the way, don't ever do that. That's a terrible option. So I did that for a year because I wanted to do something different. Turned out that's not really exactly what I wanted to do, but I'm glad I sort of took that path and at least had a different path to go down and take a look at it. And then I came back to this role that I'm at now at Vail Health. I started out here as a data engineer, and then eventually just last year was promoted to manager of data operations. And my team supports our reporting and analytics at Vail Health, as well as SQL Server database management and traditional sort of data engineering and interfacing between our different healthcare systems. So, yeah.
Very interesting stuff that we didn't cover in, the intake. I'm curious. I mean, this is kind of going back to one of your first comments. I don't know if you remember, because I had to really dust off the cobwebs on this one. Were you a fan of the Zerg or the Protoss or the Terrans when you played StarCraft?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. I love that. So I was a fan of the Terrans.
Yep.
And the reason I was a fan of the Terrans is that you could level up I forget the units, the basic soldier units, right? You could get the stimp packs with them, and you could basically produce those faster than anything else. And so I just produced all of those and then just bum rush anybody else after that. I wasn't very good at it. Like, all my buddies were way better at these games than I was. I was terrible. They made fun of me all the time, but at least that was my approach to it. So
yeah, you didn't strike me as a Zerg kind of guy. I think I could tell.
Different, unique case.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that you touched on. I mean, I've definitely noticed a difference in terms of people that come from a non-traditional background versus a very traditional background. It's like the people that come from non-traditional backgrounds have a very scrappy mentality where you got to fight for every inch. And you're always wondering, at least a lot of the other people that I've talked to, like imposter syndrome. seems to be very, very prevalent among the non-traditional community. I'm curious if you could touch on, has it ever crept up into your psyche, and what are some of the ways that you deal with it? And to be fair, I come from a very traditional background. I still deal with it too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 1,000%. Right. When I was young and not having a degree, not having gone through college and done that, I definitely had a chip on my shoulder. And to your point, like I had to be scrappy. I had to fight for every inch because I needed to prove myself. And part of that like helped me grow. It obviously worked, but I still look back at it and I still have that. Like I still walk into rooms where people have master's degrees in data science and business administration and what have you, engineering degrees, and I still feel a little inadequate and not equipped, even though I spent the last 23 years doing this same work like that I've been doing. Right. So, yeah, it's interesting. The advice that I would give to people is, even though this was my path, and I think you can still potentially do that, I would say if I had to go back and tell myself back when I was 18, 19 years old, go to college, go do that, right? Because at least then you wouldn't carry that sort of that feeling that you have that you're inadequate or not equipped to do the role, even though you've done it for 23 years, right? So I would definitely go back. And in fact, just this past year, I've kind of taken that approach and doing some training classes in AI and machine learning because I wanted to. It's actually felt really good, surprisingly, to go back to school and actually, well, I should say go to school for that matter. And I've really enjoyed it. So, but yeah, I would definitely tell people go to school if you have the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always really like it too when people have the mentality of continuously learning, of continuously going to school. I feel odd if I don't have like one or two Coursera courses that I'm like late on getting my assessments in, because it's just like I had taken a few on TensorFlow earlier this year too and got that exact same feeling. It's like, man, this is kind of fun. I don't know.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. Maybe we're weird. It's possible.
I took recently, just this past year, I took a course on AI and healthcare
Mm-hmm.
through MIT Sloan School of Management. And I was so happy to turn in an assignment. Like it had been 20 some years since I turned in an assignment. And I was geeked about it. I was like, this is great. I'm going to do this more often. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I agree with you. Continuous learning, especially in our industry, because it changes so rapidly. I've seen so many changes from the 2000s to 2010, 2000 to 2020, and now the shift into AI and ML. You have to be continuously sort of up to date and trying to do the best you can. It's almost impossible to stay up to date on everything, but anywhere that you can, you need to go back to school or find a way to take Coursera or any way you can to keep up to date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of changes that have come in the field, I'm curious from a data operations perspective, like what have those existential shifts have been? I mean, probably like when you and I got started, the cloud wasn't even a notion. It was like we always had servers that were on-prem. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you've gone through? And then, maybe you could touch on some of the other things that like you're perhaps seeing come down on the horizon that don't rhyme with AI, or they can, that's fine.
Don't run with AI. Yeah, I think to your point, like from about 2000 to 2010, maybe there wasn't most of it was on prem. You were working with on-prem SQL servers. You were working with business intelligence development studio bids. Like big data wasn't a concept. Cloud wasn't a concept. So early on, it was you got to kind of build your own tools. There wasn't a whole lot out there to do data engineering or data analytics. And since then, I almost sort of skipped over the big data era, and that was sort of my own fault. Like I got into a space where I wasn't continuously learning. And that was sort of a mistake because I missed sort of that big data era. NoSQL sort of went by the way, didn't really stick around. I don't know. Some people still champion it, and there's still areas for it. But that kind of 2010 to maybe 2018 era of big data, um, I just kind of skipped past it. But it was definitely a thing, and it was bigger than I made it out to be. But then now coming back into it, it's all API development, data extracts through API, and cloud engineering, Azure, AWS, and it's more become a coding discipline than anything else. And I've been surprised by that. Data engineering has really matured into its own sort of discipline. And there's people that are way better at it than I am. I've kind of done my own thing. We don't use a whole lot of API engineering or Python coding around here to do what we need to do, although we have some of it. And there's people on my team that have that knowledge. But yeah, the where I've seen it change, in the last couple of years has been more to that coding discipline level of practice or opportunity. Like it's sort of interesting in the way that's been approached, and I agree with it. It's far more efficient, and it smooths things out and makes things a lot easier to transfer data back and forth. But it's definitely not the scrappy early on type of work that I was dealing with when I first started my career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious. So you mentioned NoSQL. I am a champion of NoSQL, but let me caveat that, because
Yeah.
that's it's a hot take. When it comes to reporting, when it comes to analytics, you can't spell no in NoSQL without it. Like it should not be anywhere near analytics and reporting. You can't do joins. The data can be messy. It's often different structures. You got to be able to sanitize it and standardize it. So from a reporting perspective, like no way, no how. From an application operation perspective, we've actually seen it be successful in used for the actual database behind the application, and then have a process that ETLs or sanitizes. There's Azure Synapse. There's a couple other tools like that will then take your NoSQL data and actually put it into a relational database, so that you just have a fighting chance of being able to run reports off of it. I'm curious if that's the approach that you've seen taken, or you've seen others, or it could just be that I'm just crazy and I'm just a star child, and crazier things have happened.
Well, no, I agree with you, right? Like, yeah, for reporting and analytics, I mean, we use Azure Synapse in our environment, so that's all SQL based. Yeah, to your point, it's not a NoSQL is not a data engineering code. It's an application system code. It's a data at the database level, and I think early on, what I heard, and maybe that's part of the reason that sort of I skipped it, is people were, basically saying, hey, NoSQL is going to replace every bit of SQL. You're not going to do SQL anymore. And if we had to geek out on and nerd on that, I think now what's fascinating to me is that I can use ChatGPT to write my SQL code, which is fascinating. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like I can do this far more efficiently and write code, but that's on a whole different tangent. But yeah, I agree with you that NoSQL has been, it has its place, but it's certainly not the foundational code set that people made it out to be, maybe 10 years ago or so.
Mm-hmm. And I think it is one of the Chat GPT, that is one of the newer tools that people have in their tool belt. There was a lot of skepticism last year coming into this year. Tools like Devin coming out, where it's going to replace us. We're not going to have jobs anymore. And they recently published an article where they found out Devin was actually, as it was going through the code, it was introducing bugs that it would later come back and fix, which I've been assured is not a proper coding practice. But also it was solving things that didn't really exist, like they weren't actual problems. So for now, I think as a wholesale replacement, we're many, many years off. But as a tool to be able to help us, to be able to say, like full disclosure, I never remember how to do a delete where I have to join to multiple tables. I always have to look it up every single time, and I don't know why. And I've been in SQL Server so long, I forget how to do things in like Postgres, and MySQL is just a little bit different. And I could spend my time Googling it, scrolling through, clicking accept all cookies, minimizing the ads, trying to find like the actual, or I could just go to like ChatGPT and be like, all right, this is what I want. And it's a plain text interface. I'm curious what your usage of it has been. Have you found that you just kind of are naturally going to it? Has it replaced Google searching altogether? You know, kind of which camp are you in?
Yeah, no, I think I'm in the same camp you are, right? Like, yeah, I don't remember half the things that I need to know when I'm writing SQL code. And you know, it's funny like how many times we ask. You know, I'm sure you've done interviews and been on the other side and interviewed people and asked them SQL questions. So it's like I feel really bad because I know that at the end of the day, we're all going to Google this question. We're going to go to Stack Override and try to answer this question for us and look through every forum, and that was always sort of complicated and you never got the right answer. And now like when I'm thinking about, we develop in Power BI for our analytics, and I use SQL, dude, I can use ChatGPT to answer those questions, and it gives me straightforward, no BS, here's the answer. And it's darn close. Most of them have been really on the nose or pretty close to it, with very few exceptions. And it's written things that I don't even have a concept for at times. Like one of the things I always forget to is like, I need to scan the database for a particular field in any table across this schema, right? Like, how do I do that? And it'll find, I just prompt it and get the answer. I'm like, oh man, it's productivity wise, it has been such a game changer. It has increased my productivity. And I don't know if you could put a number on it. I'm sure you feel the same way. Like from anything from SQL code to Power BI to anything that I need technically. One of the cool things I saw recently is I got an error from Synapse, and I just screenshotted the error and I plugged it into ChatGPT and I said, "What is this?" And all of a sudden, it gave me every bit of information that I needed to know just from a picture. And I was like, wow. Okay, this is amazing. This is exactly what I needed. Bye bye Google. I don't use you anymore. Sorry. No, I'm using ChatGPT to answer my questions.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I am getting more and more into that habit.
Yeah.
So that's good. So kind of to wrap it up. I mean, we've talked about continuous learning. Tools like ChatGPT are going to be here. If I don't know why I'm thinking it's because I recently watched Formula One on Netflix. Like if Max Verstappen could like wear a glove and make himself 2% more effective, he'd be like, where is this glove? For you and I, this tool, even if it makes us just like 1% more effective, having that in our tool belt as professionals, like we would be remiss. Like we would not be doing our fiduciary duty to our organizations if we didn't take advantage of them safely, securely, not pasting PHI or PII into them. So being able to embrace new tools as they come along without being a Luddite, I would say that's one of the big recommendations for the next generation of tech leaders. Continuous learning being the second. Anything else that you can think of that, if you could go back 10 years, be like, all right, Jody, make sure to do not going to, culinary school, although that might've been good. I don't know. It's a good experience.
If you want to, but yeah. If you're a tech geek and you want to go into culinary school, you need to spend about as much time as you did doing tech geek stuff to figure out culinary. But no, I think, I was thinking about that, before we joined on the call here. As a leader, I think it's important to know your team and know how to delegate. And I've had manager roles over the past 20 years. And it wasn't until really this past 2 years when I've been a manager here that I really put into practice sort of everything that I made mistakes on prior. And I knew number one is for new leaders that are coming into management or senior level roles, and you have a team under you, there's a couple things that I think are important that I learned in this role. One is to not make many changes. Don't try to like just part the seas and do something different early on. Let your people get comfortable with how you interact, get comfortable with your people, and know how they work, because everyone is going to work differently. I have team members across the board that work in different ways. Either some are hyper focused and don't want you to interrupt, or some are, hey, I want to talk to you, every other day about this, and let's go through this. Let's talk through this together. Each one of your people is going to have a different perspective on how to do their role. And it's not really up to you to decide sort of how they do their role. You want them to sort of do their work and complete the tasks that are given to them. But how they go about doing that, you don't want to get involved in that. You want your people to have the freedom to express themselves and develop themselves and complete the work how they see best. And so that's one of the things I definitely put into practice over the last 2 years. The other one I would say is you got to learn to delegate. I know as tech geeks, as individual contributors, we are hyper focused on our work, and it is hard to pass on that work. And it's hard to pass it down. And I knew from the leadership that I have here at Vail and other positions that I've been in, that you can't be in that space. You can't function and be successful as an individual contributor and as a manager. You have to be able to delegate your work and pass down and be unbiased about it, and just say, hey, can you do this for me? Here's what I need you to do. Be clear in your communication and just pass it down. So I would say a couple things, and I'll add one more to it. As a new leader, like I said, get comfortable with your people, know how they function and know how they work. And that may take some time. That may take 6 months to a year to really understand your people. Give yourself that space to learn. To delegate the work and be unbiased about it. Be just everything you can that makes sense. Pass it down to your people and allow them to build you up and allow that team to thrive, because that's the way your team is going to thrive when everybody's sort of working on various things and the work is delegated and you're not the gatekeeper, right? And the third, I lost my train of thought, but that's all right. We'll call it there. So that's the advice I would give to new tech leaders.
Awesome. No, that's echoes very much what I have found out in my experience. So no, Jody, thank you very much for being on the program. Appreciate it, dude. It's always a pleasure get to chat with you.
Same to you, Zach. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you in the future.